Today on Portland Tea Party, when is it time to GTFO Portland? Coming right up. Hola y bienvenidos a Portland Tea Party. Me llamo Tiara Ciara. Estamos aquí en Tulum, Quintana Roo, Mexico. And that is as much Spanish as I'm going to speak today. I'm on vacation and it is lovely down here in Mexico. Had to get some sun and heat as we all do after those Portland winters. And I thought, what better thing than to talk about when I lived here and why I left Portland to live abroad and talk to one of my friends who did the same thing. So we'll get to that in just a moment. The news this week, I haven't been following it because I'm on vacation and I can only take so much news. So I'm on a bit of a news diet. But as you know, the legislature finished out last week. Definitely follow that in the Oregon Capitol Chronicle. What happened, what's changing as a result of our sprint session last week, and in the New York Times. Does Portland need a Soho House? I say yes. However, my invitation to membership seems to have gotten lost in the mail. And I thought, well, that's okay. Soho House is about being in your late 20s, early 30s. It's all good. I'm going to, it's fine. And then in the New York Times article, they interview somebody who's 49, 4 years my senior, who's a member. So I don't know what's going on here, Soho House, Portland, but right now I don't approve. So, we'll have a conversation about that when I get back. In the meantime, I'll just be chilling here in Tulum. Anyway, when we come back, it is Portland and Tea with Tiara Darnell. Hello and welcome, Tiara.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here with you.
It's nice to see you, and tell everyone where you are broadcasting from.
I'm coming at you from Mexico City, Mexico.
Wow.
My home for the last 3 years.
I can't believe it's been 3 years already.
Yeah, 3 years. I think March 20th or 21st, something like that. So, yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And you've had another huge anniversary recently. What was that?
The 1 year anniversary of the restaurant that I opened, Flaxi Cocina, Mexico City's first and only soul food restaurant. So it's such a trip to even think that that is something that I'm doing, and that we made it our first year with somebody who has zero experience in restaurants and the restaurant industry. And this is, it's just been a complete pivot, but it's been a joy.
Bold moves. Your restaurant has been getting a lot of traction. I've seen media about it online. Being the only soul food restaurant in a city of 16 million people?
22
million people. And I think people don't realize how many Black people there are in Mexico. Maybe, I don't know so much living, but also as tourists.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start with the Afro-Mexican population and that part of the African diaspora, and then only I think probably in terms of people from the U.S. and Black folks from Europe coming, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, mostly accelerated by the pandemic. The community has grown a lot. I know when I got here, it didn't seem like there were a ton of other Black Americans from the U.S., but that has definitely changed. And now with Flaxi Cocina being a thing that you do when you're Black and you come to Mexico City, I get to see everybody all the time.
Yeah, you must be a magnet for all of the Black community in Mexico City and throughout Mexico that goes through Mexico City.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be a part of that. And it's kind of why I started the restaurant in the first place. Yes, I love food, I enjoy cooking, but I think it's also just the way that food brings people together. And so that's really, one of the motivating factors for doing what I'm doing now.
Couldn't you have just opened a restaurant in Portland?
I don't think I could have afforded to open a restaurant in Portland.
Yeah, is there a huge difference in the startup costs?
Yes, and also to just the ways that you can kind of like, let's just say things are a little bit more flexible here than they are in the US. Let's just put it that
I'm
way.
aware. Yeah, I have a friend who owns a coffee shop here in Tulum. She's American, and
Mhm.
I call it the Powell's Books of
Uh,
Tulum because it's a bookstore and coffee shop called Cara
yeah.
Feliz. Check it out.
Uh-huh.
And there's extremely different laws here around how you run a business, and some of them are more strict, and a lot of them are more flexible. So,
Right, exactly, exactly. There's a way to do it for everybody out here.
and tell me a little bit about your background career wise, because you were not a restaurateur before now.
No, I was like on the other side of this conversation. I was a podcast producer, audio editor, doing sound design. I have made it to the most exciting opportunity that I could think of, which was doing that work for Spotify. And previous to that, when I was in Portland, I was kind of doing it on a freelance basis and just kind of the same thing I'm doing here, making my own path where there wasn't one before.
And when you compare, it's just so hard not to dive into the tea. So we're going to get into the tea very
Ah.
quickly here. But let's just start with, what are you most proud of when it comes to your last year in business?
Life comes in waves, and I think just being able to ride the waves and also like the mental and emotional balance that you have to have that comes with it. Things aren't always balanced, but I think it's the moments when things feel uneven, when you have that self awareness that, okay, this is off, and now what do I need to do to get, maybe I can't get 100% balance because that's just the nature of being an entrepreneur. And then, of course, the restaurant industry is so hard. Doesn't matter where you are, but especially here, you add on me not having, that experience or in a business partner or somebody who I could rely on to kind of help guide me. And then doing it in a foreign country in a language that is my second language. With laws and stuff like so. I think just riding the waves and being able to make it to the first year just felt like such a milestone and just like I think maybe vindication too that no matter what it is that I do, when I'm passionate about it and I want to see it go, it's going to happen. So I think that's just a lesson for everybody to kind of take chances on themselves and to know that it's not going to be easy. There, like I said, it's been a joy to have the restaurant because of all the things that have come from it, the community that I've built and all the different people I'm meeting and being able to have conversations with Mexicans about like, well, what is soul food and what is the difference between like this and Popeyes and this and KFC and like how about all the culture that comes with it. So there's just some rich conversations and things that get to happen that I find that joyful. But don't get me wrong, there have definitely been nights where I've woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning like crying or like did I forget to order chives or like whatever, like something like that. So I think that just again riding those waves and knowing now that I've done it for a year what that cycle kind of looks like, that's something to be proud of.
It's absolutely something to be proud of. I mean, you're taking me down memory lane for sure. This is my 15th year of being self-employed, of being my own boss and having my
Mm,
own businesses. And, so many of the cliches are just lies, like follow your dream as if that's the like last chapter and they lived happily ever after, right? Like that is
yeah.
just the beginning of the biggest roller coaster ever.
Yes.
And, like this whole idea of, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like it is
Lies.
so much work. Lies. Yeah. My business is on my mind almost 24/7.
Yes.
And everything depends on you. If something doesn't happen, you got to pick it up. Like there's not really, you can't be entirely off, right? Like you got to pick. I'm on vacation. I did a presentation a couple days ago for our client in Oregon because nobody else was available to do it. Like I have to be the person to do that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's always
Also,
you at the end of the line.
yeah. Also, I have a feeling we have this in common. I am the hardest boss I've ever had.
I don't know. It's been some difficult ones out there.
I have high standards, so like I can't bullshit my way out of anything as my own boss, right?
Yeah, 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 100%, 100%. I think I have a vision and I'm definitely one of those people that like that is what I want to achieve. And so, yes, I do think that I can be hard and tough on myself sometimes, but also too just recognizing that it's not always going to be exactly what you want it to be. But if you have gotten close enough, that's also something to be proud of and to just move on to the next thing, you know?
Yeah, when I'm working with entrepreneurs and they're working out ideas, or even people who already have a business and want to do a different direction or initiative, I
Mm-hmm.
say, like, what are you willing to work on for 2 years? What process is going to be worth the effort, because you may end up in a different place than you expected. But if you're only looking at the result and not the reward of the process, it's going to be disappointing.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some tea when we get back, the tea on leaving Portland, why we do it, when we're conflicted, when we go back, and when we stay the hell out. All right. It's time for the tea here with Tara Darnell. So we met when you lived in Portland and you were working for the city of Portland, right?
Yes, I was working for BPS and I was doing a little bit of everything when it came to like, social media, communications, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's a lot. I work with BPS now. They're one of my clients. Um, Lovely people. I actually adore everybody that I work with there. But fast forward, was it 2020 when you left?
I left in December 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Why did you
Mhm.
leave? And did you know you were leaving for good?
I knew that it was going to be a while before I came back. I think at that time, I remember even before December, um, it must have been like in the summertime. I used to live in John's Landing, like right across from well, oh fuck. You guys are gonna edit this part out, right?
We're live. We're live.
No, but I used to live in John's Landing, and I lived. I think it's Willamette Park. Oh my god, I've been gone
Yeah.
so long that I can't
No,
even
I
remember
know.
like the names
Yeah.
and stuff. But I used to live across the street from that park, and I would take walks and go down to the dock over there pretty frequently. And I remember one day, I don't know when it was. It might have been like August or something like that. I was down there and I saw the sailboats out on the river, and I was like, man, you know what? I'm gonna take sailing next summer. And as soon as I like said it in my mind, this very like it can only be intuition, I guess, but like this very loud voice said, "You're not gonna be here next summer," and it
Mm.
just kind of like surprised me, like how quick that came to me and how loud it was. And I was like, wow, okay. But at that time, I had no idea what I was going to be doing, where I was going. But just that voice in my head was just like, you're not going to be here. And then it so happened that with the relationship that I was in at the time, my boyfriend got a job in Buffalo, New York. I was not very excited about Buffalo, New York, but I had been like encouraging him to, to take the next step in his career. I didn't think that I was going to be a step, all the way to the almost Midwest, of the U.S. But that's kind of what happened. And at the time, I also remember feeling like I was getting kind of fed up with Portland. I was just I don't. I think it was just, and maybe it's a hallmark of like my generation or like the years of my generation that I'm from. Millennials. But I'm an older millennial. I just felt like I have been trying. I had done everything that everybody told me to do. I went to college. I graduated. I did the Peace Corps in Morocco for 2 years. I had a huge pivot from what I thought I was going to do, left the East Coast, Washington, D.C., where I'm from, moved to Cornelius, Oregon, and started working in the wine industry, almost like a month after coming back from 2 years in Morocco. And I realized, that I enjoyed that, but it wasn't really for me at the time. Bertoni Faustin was not a household name or a very well known name. So I didn't really see anybody like me who was in that industry. And it was incredibly difficult in a lot of ways. Not only the work, although I did enjoy it, but just really like finding the community there that I felt like I needed. And so I left the wine industry, but I decided to stay in Oregon. And if you fast forward through all these things, I started working at OPB. I did graduate school at the University of Oregon, thinking that that was going to help me get a job at OPB. It never did. And so I feel like I just, between like the career stuff and on the personal side, sort of like the struggles that a lot of Black people and people of color in general go through living in the Pacific Northwest, but especially in Portland, it just felt like I'm tired of this. Like at that point, I think I had been in Oregon for 8 years, and so I just realized that there has to be something better, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know where I'm going to find it, but I know that this is not it, and I'm starting to feel like I don't like the person that I'm becoming. I don't like how I feel emotionally in this place, and I just need to get some distance between me and this place in order to figure out how I feel about it. And if I take that time and I work through some things and I figure out what exactly, if I can pinpoint what it is that's making me feel like this, and I feel like, okay, now I can address that and I can go back and I can do it differently, then I will. But the pandemic happened. I got stuck in Buffalo, and I was there for a year. And then after a year, I just kind of realized I already knew when I got to Buffalo that I was going to be a short timer anyway.
Yeah.
So, but the pandemic definitely had me there for much longer than probably I even would have been. But I decided, yeah, I'm gonna go to Mexico and just do something completely different because I knew from those 2 years in Morocco that I loved living abroad. I love that distance from the U.S. and from all of our mess, and just being immersed in a different culture that yes has its own mess and its own complications, but it's just different when it's not like I don't know, it's not the US. And so I wanted that feeling again. And that's what led me to come to Mexico.
Yeah, and we were talking then because you were in that career transition. I want to acknowledge what you said about the career track in Oregon. It wasn't until right after the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020
Hmm.
that corporate America, especially corporate Portland, started falling all over themselves to hire people of color, but specifically Black people. And so there was a lot of bias and inequity that hadn't been examined yet. And that's a very long term project, but I think in Portland, particularly, it hadn't been examined. And so you left before some of that reckoning. I left because of some of that reckoning because, I was solo bubble pandemic, thought it was going to last a couple weeks as we did exactly. This was our first stay home day actually 4 years ago. And yeah, okay. And so I between the pandemic and staring down this winter for my mental health, where I was going to be by myself, stuck inside, um, and staring down like this reckoning that was happening. So I'm going to talk for a little while now while Tiara charges her computer. So what happened for me was that, after the George Floyd thing happened, all of a sudden there was a lot of awareness and progressive well intentions from like our white community, and it was appreciated in a lot of ways. But also, what started happening pretty immediately in my work was that I had white people telling me how to do diversity in my job, in my company that I own. And it was incredibly insulting because, of course, I've been thinking about these things and it's been a implicit and explicit part of what I do my entire career as a person of color. And even now, when I'm asked to like write an equity statement or something like that for a project, I feel pretty insulted. And then the protests were happening and riots, and we're looking at uh, Trump election potentially, in November. And so by like August, September of 2020, I wanted to get out. And I always had one foot out the door on Portland because, even though I had grown up in the area, I never felt like I really fit in Portland.
Mhm.
I don't file myself solely under weird. I like things like the Soho House, you know. And
Yeah.
so, I wanted to see before I really rooted or like bought a home in Portland if I needed to live somewhere else. And so, the pandemic gave me an opportunity to leave. And so I came to Mexico, and I was saying to someone here the other day, there's a thing about being here in this town that has a lot of expats where I feel like I fit in more than any other place because I've always been, like multiracial, multi-coastal and everything. And there's something about kind of all being expats together that feels like, we all just fit for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, and I wish, like I always tell people that my biggest regret is that I didn't come sooner
Right.
down here. And also, by the way, we have a Soho House here too. I don't have a membership either, but you know,
Well, they wouldn't let me in anyway.
but I think that the first year of the pandemic and being in Buffalo was probably pretty good for me because it really just because it's one thing to I think when you go, if you went to Mexico, you already knew that you weren't gonna like probably meet, or you thought you would meet some friends. Maybe you wouldn't meet like as many because of the pandemic and this and that.
Right.
I don't know if you had been to where you went before or
I
anything
had
like
been
that.
here. I knew I could work from here because I had done that from New York. I had come down to Riviera Maya and just worked for, a couple weeks at a time. So I knew I could do that.
Yeah.
I just came for sun and to be able to go outside in the winter. I didn't realize it was going to be so open, right? Because it's a
Ah,
very
right, right, right.
certain,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
because
like
it
Florida
was.
here, right? And so
Yeah.
I felt like I was on a college campus. It was so easy to make friends. And I
Hmm.
still, like, I come down here and I've got a whole group of friends
Right.
still.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, and it wasn't like that for me. Trust me, if any of us had the foresight
Yeah.
that the pandemic was coming, Buffalo was the last place I would have chosen to spend it. But I didn't. Yeah, I really didn't have a chance to make too many friends, and honestly, even in the short time that I was there before the pandemic started, it was the winter, it was cold, and most of the time I was so enamored with living so close to Toronto, Canada that I was like going there all the time. So I didn't really like have a whole lot of friends. And I say all that to say that it really forced me to focus on myself and, not be too distracted by all of those other things that I said would, take me away from trying to pinpoint those emotions from Portland.
Um, you may be able to hear the construction in the background. Tulum is like continues its construction boom. It's really you just like you have to just drown out construction sounds when you're here. Like,
Yeah, I would say this is even in Mexico City, one of the noisiest places that I've ever lived.
yeah, you get
I'm
used to it,
surprised.
right?
I thought it was going to be noise on my end before yours, but
Yeah.
yeah. All that to say that that year was really pivotal, and I think that when I came back to Portland the first Christmas of the pandemic, and I saw a friend of mine who I'd known from grad school, and he also had been for most of the first year of the pandemic in Mexico. He was in Merida, like 2 or 3 hours
Mhm.
north of where you are, and we had a really quick conversation because he was on his way to work, and we didn't have any other time to meet before I left. I remember it was like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. He brought me a coffee, and we sat on the hood of his car right outside of Providence Park and just talked about Mexico. And he was just like saying about how awesome it was, and this, and like, why are you even here? I remember him saying that because I was working remotely at the time, and he planted that seed, and I went home and I really like thought deeply on it and was like, yeah, yeah, I'm ready for something else. And I've done the Portland thing. I did the Buffalo thing. I'm not the same person who I was, when I came to Oregon at 24 and the relationship that I was in. And so all of the things just kind of fell in place for me to be able to leave and do something different. And I'm really glad I did. So I left in March 2021. And like I said, it's been 3 years since I've been here, and I've been very, very happy with the decision.
Yeah, we just have a couple minutes left, so I want to say, I did end up going back. my family's in the Portland area. I have a lot of friends there, and I enjoy being like part of the community and working on some of these tough problems. And I just didn't have start over energy. Like Tulum was not my forever place, and I didn't want to start over in another American city because I just didn't have it.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
just didn't have it. What do you think you're in Mexico City for the foreseeable?
For the foreseeable future, yes, because I put all my energy into this restaurant basket, so I'm not gonna like leave, willy nilly or anything like that. But yeah, I kind of think the other thing too was when I came down here, I really thought that I was only gonna be here for 6 months and that I would go back to the U.S., but I didn't know where. I don't think I was like really feeling Portland still at that point, and um, it probably would have been Chicago except for those winters. So I ended up like, renewing and renewing my time here, and then I just decided to stay after I got laid off.
Awesome. And if you ever want to go back to the US or Portland, they're still there. I think living
I,
abroad is one of the most magical experiences and character shaping experiences one can have.
yeah.
What's your advice to anyone in Portland or elsewhere who might be on the fence about spending some time outside of the country?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to spend some time outside the country to see other cultures and places and people that just have a way of life that's different to ours. I think it just really it gives you some perspective when you can back away from the thing that you know and see it, at a distance. So I would always encourage that. And I think if you're planning on or you're thinking about moving, um, there's a lot of people. There's some people who've done it with a lot of money. There's some people who've done it with a little money. There's some people who did it with a plan, and some people like me who had no plan, and the plan just kind of unfolded, as things went along. So I think that not being afraid to take the leap and do something different is the main thing. And then you always, I think a lot of times we think we don't have a safety net or that there's no net. What happens if it fails? There's a net, and your community will catch you. Your family will catch you. You can always go back. So I'm fortunate that I haven't had that break the glass emergency. Have to go back to the U.S. and live with my dad. This is definitely a tough path, but it's been a rewarding one.
Awesome. Where can people follow your adventures online?
Blaxicosina is on Instagram at Blaxicosina, Blaxicina.
COCINA. Yeah, we'll
Yes,
link it from the show notes. Yeah.
yeah, link it in the show notes. So we're mostly on Instagram. We also are on TikTok, and right now, actually, probably by the time this goes up, I will have launched a. This is a small GoFundMe campaign to support two members of the Haitian diaspora community that came across my path as I was walking to work one day, and they have just been really, really awesome. And so I'm looking to raise funds to help them get humanitarian visas to
Wow.
stay here and to be able to build a life of their own. So that's something I'm really excited about, and I would appreciate any support that the Portland community can give towards that effort. So,
All right, we'll link that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you, Tiara. It's so nice to see you. Muchas gracias.
gracias.
When we're back, the party. All right, it's party time. Where is the party at in Portland this week? It might be at Soho House, but I wouldn't know because they didn't offer me a membership. Not bitter at all. So, anyway, it is amateur weekend. I'm sorry, St. Patrick's Day. And so, if you enjoy things like drinking beer and wild abandon, the place to be is downtown Portland. There is going to be a big festival with lots of really cool stuff going on. And of course, the St. Patrick's Day run. So if you can get out there and run, or you can get out there and cheer people on. But get out there because it's a high of 70 degrees this weekend out there. Enjoy it, soak it in, get some vitamin D. Just make sure you spend some time outside this weekend. All right. We have got amazing guests lined up for the next few weeks. So be sure to subscribe to Portland Tea Party on YouTube and put this in your calendar. We're live every Friday at 9 a.m. And remember, I'm still working on my tagline. Hasta la vista.